Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
I'm Tommy Vietor.
On today's show, Democrats fight off a red wave in a historic midterm that defied most expectations and handed Donald Trump and MAGA Republican election deniers a stunning defeat. That felt good to say. We'll go through all the big races and early data to unpack exactly what happened, including some of the races that are too close to call at this hour. And we'll also talk about what's next for both parties. But first, and most importantly, thank you to everyone who signed up for Vote Save America, everyone who gave your time and your money and your energy to this campaign, especially in such a tough year. We said a lot of these incredibly close races would be decided by the margin of effort, and that's exactly what happened. That's because of all of you. So we wanted to thank you all for that.
All right, some stats. In this midterm cycle, VSA volunteers and donors raised $5.2 million and filled 46,672 volunteer shifts to help elect progressives and pass progressive ballot measures across the country. And our VSA community of 1,270 super volunteers were a huge part of that success, making over 1.5 million voter contacts. That's amazing.
That's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. You guys were the best. All right, let's get to the news. And for the first time in a long time, it is good. As of this morning, the Democrats have a very good chance of holding the Senate, thanks to big wins by Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire and Jon Fetterman in Pennsylvania. Republicans are still favored to flip the House, but it's still not a sure thing. And right now, they're only projected to have a very slim majority. Democrats won governor's races in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Kansas, New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, Minnesota, and Michigan, where they also flipped the state legislature, giving Democrats the first trifecta there in 40 years. It appears right now they're about to flip the Pennsylvania State House as well. The Pennsylvania State
Such a big deal.
That's huge.
Voters enshrined abortion rights in the state constitutions of California, Michigan, and Vermont, while Kentucky rejected an abortion ban. Missouri and Maryland legalized marijuana. Nebraska raised the minimum wage, and South Dakota expanded Medicaid. There's probably more, but let's stop there for now and talk about big picture before we dive into these results. Obviously, we don't have all the data yet, but what do we know so far about how and why this happened last night? Dan.
Verbal message box.
Yeah. Hey, message box at us for a second. Yeah. No, I have to go read the message box.
Right, yeah. What am I going to say on Monday?
It's sitting in my outbox. It's send when we're done here. So I'd say a couple things here. One, it's very clear the red wave did not happen. Mm-hmm. And it did not happen because Democrats very successfully were able to turn this election from a simple thermostatic up or down typical midterm into a referendum on Republican extremism embodied by the decision of the Supreme Court in the Dobbs case. And you saw Democratic level turnout. You saw independents who may have qualms about President Biden or are concerned about inflation vote for Democrats because Democrats were running as the bulwark against that extremism. And it allowed us to dramatically outperform what anyone thought was possible in the House, potentially hold the Senate, with the obvious caveat that there is a lot of vote to be counted. Some very important Senate races that could go either way and could tip this. We could still end all of this with losing the House and the Senate. Yeah. But the early results show that the anti-MAGA, pro-democracy majority in this country came out to vote and sent a pretty powerful message in a lot of in blue and purple states.
Dan, what do you think the verdict is on the Mitch McConnell one sentence answer? Candidate quality matters.
I think that is, very, very clearly matters. It is, you can look at it in a couple ways. Like there are some political environment, partisan makeup of states is obviously the most important thing. So you saw very good candidates like Tim Ryan fall along the lines of that state, but in very, very close races.
And he probably pulled some of those House races over the finish line. He probably won some seats in Ohio because of Tim Ryan.
Yeah. And you saw in, whether it is in Pennsylvania, it is in governor's races in Michigan, you saw good candidates beat bad candidates. And if we hold on in Nevada and win the runoff in Georgia, that will be yet another example of the Republicans will have left a lot of potential opportunities on the table because they ran very bad candidates who were out of the mainstream, who embodied that extremist message.
In fact, where Republicans ran less Trumpy candidates, those candidates outperformed the more MAGA candidates in those same states. So like Mike DeWine in Ohio outperformed J.D. Vance by a lot. Chris Sununu in New Hampshire outperformed Don Bolduc by a lot. Brian Kemp in Georgia outperformed Herschel Walker by a lot.
Split ticket voters exist, people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's
remember when that was a
impossible
debate?
for everyone to believe it's a real thing.
Yeah, split ticket voters exist. Also, that like it looks like independents just didn't break bad, which is really unusual. I do want to like
I mean, hasn't ever happened in a midterm
really surprising
for the president's party since like what 2002,
2002 is the one modern political history exception to that rule.
and in 2002 George W. Bush's approval rating was sky high, which is what happened. Joe Biden's approval rating as of this midterm was the worst approval rating of any post-war president to head into a midterm.
I want to understand more as we get more votes and people look at it more closely. So McConnell saying candidate quality matters was a dig at McCarthy because he was saying people pay attention to their senators and not as much to their House candidates. But yeah, we did see a lot of these more extreme MAGA House candidates lose. But then you have like a guy that was at the insurrection winning on Long Island, which I think is kind of strange. And so like how much of what happened in these House races where it's closer than we thought it would be is because there was this national conversation about how extreme these Republicans have gotten. How much of it was the breaking through of these individual candidates and how terrible they were. And I don't think we know right now.
Yeah, there are some examples like, I think it's the Marcy Kaptur seat in Ohio, which was gerrymandered for the specific purpose of forcing her out. She won because of a Trump-endorsed candidate named J.R. Majewski, who lied about his service in Afghanistan and was a general nut job. And like that's one specific example where he got a ton of attention, in part because Trump, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, shined the spotlight on that candidate and nationalized that race in a way that was actually helpful to Democrats.
Yeah, I kind of want to understand how much attention how much attention does it take to get how bad a House candidate is to cost them their seat? Because we have a few places where there are some Trumpy people that won in like kind of more moderate districts, and then we have cases like that where because it was so big and it was so public, it seems like it mattered.
I still think in the House, it's more about sort of larger structural environmental forces here. I mean, you were talking about the anti-Trump majority. I remember talking to Michael Pothorzer for the Wilderness, like before the election season started, or at least at the very beginning. And he said to me, he's like, I know Democrats are nervous. Democrats have a lot of things to be nervous about, but there is a path, and that path is the anti-Trump coalition showing up. And the best chance to get them to show up is to make them understand that the threat of Trumpism is still very real, and the threat of Republican extremism is still very real. Now that, of course, was before Dobbs, right. And then Dobbs became the greatest example of MAGA extremism. But also all of these candidates that Trump had were also just terrible, terrible candidates. The economy was the top issue for voters. 3/4 of voters said it was fair or poor. 4/5 said inflation caused them either severe or moderate hardship. But Democrats still won 40% of voters who said the economy was just, quote, not so good. So that was actually a big deal. It looks like slightly more Republicans turned out than Democrats. This was an R+4 electorate. But independents, and especially independent women, broke for Democrats slightly, and then broke for Democrats by a bigger margin in the Senate races in Arizona, Georgia, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. Abortion was the second most important issue for voters and the most important issue for most Democrats, especially in states where the outcome of the race would determine the future of abortion access in that state, like Pennsylvania and Michigan.
Yeah. It's interesting, notable that abortion, obviously, we talked about this before, but abortion was more salient in issues where the vote really, really mattered, as opposed to California, where there's a constitutional amendment now that will be in place soon. It's also interesting and probably not surprising that independents broke particularly hard against the wackiest Republican candidates.
Yeah.
Like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I do. Like just thinking back how we were feeling in the days before, obviously the narrative had turned sour on us, and there were a lot of bad polls, but there was this hope, right, that we talked about it, that we're like lighting this candle for this Dobbs vote that's going to be out there, that's going to show up. And it does seem like that happened. Like it seemed like we did have that Dobbs vote in a way that really helped us.
With independents,
yeah,
and independent women. I mean,
even in Kentucky,
we'll have the data will come in the next month, and we'll have more sort of like demographic data. But in the initial exits that are now weighted with some of the results, you see that like young people made up slightly less of the electorate than in 2018. There was some erosion among voters of color. There's some erosion for Democrats among white college voters, but still the coalition basically held that we had in 2020 and 2018.
I also think it's worth just caveating that sometimes the subsamples that you just mentioned within the exit polls get changed drastically over time.
That's what I
You
said,
are
yeah,
not talking about, those are not the best numbers.
We're gonna have to wait.
Unless they confirm our prior beliefs.
In which case,
then
we'll
they're
cling
written
to
in
them.
We'll
stone.
never adjust
yeah,
this.
like
They're a
guns
little-
and religion.
The point is they're better than they were last night because overnight they sort of weight them to the results.
One other just exit poll result that I think is worth noting is that in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania exit poll, abortion was the number one issue, outpacing
Which of
inflation by
course
8
makes sense.
points.
Yeah.
Because
If Mastriano
if
won,
Mastriano
abortion
had
was
won,
done.
they would have banned abortion.
Yeah, and just like I just mentioned it, but the fact that in Kentucky, by polls, one of the most anti-abortion states, an anti-abortion measure failed at the ballot box just tells you that there really is, from Kansas to Kentucky to everywhere, this big pro-choice majority that turned out, and I think that is, it's really hopeful.
Let's talk about the Senate. As of this recording, it's still too early to call it. Mark Kelly is leading in Arizona. Raphael Warnock is leading in Georgia, though it's looking like that will definitely go to a runoff. And Catherine Cortez Masto is behind in behind in Nevada right now, but she could end up winning once all the mail-in ballots are counted. We just don't know how many are out there or where they are or what the split is, but we should find out more about that today. But the big win to celebrate right now is John Fetterman's victory over the pee-drinking puppy killer from New Jersey,
John, take
Dr. Oz.
Why'd take your
sit on-
take your boot off his neck. He lost.
Why'd you sit on that branding till today? I like that.
Dan knows that. We talked about that on the Thursday pub.
You guys do a show on Thursday?
Yeah, I know.
What's the yeah?
Here's
Probably
a-
pretty good.
Here's a clip from Fetterman's victory speech.
This race is for the future of every community all across Pennsylvania. For every small town or person that ever felt left behind, I'm proud of what we ran on. Protecting a woman's right to choose, raising our minimum wage, fighting the union way of life. Healthcare is a fundamental human right. It saved my life, and it should all be there for you when you ever should need it. Standing up to corporate greed, making more things right here in America and right here in Pennsylvania, and standing up for our democracy.
How did Fetterman do it?
I mean, I just want to say pour one out, in this case, I guess a warm glass of pee, for all the people who had Fetterman's done because of the debate takes.
Look,
I would like you to know.
Dan and I have made our thoughts. on
Yeah,
this
I heard you guys talk about this.
I'd like to be known that at 4:30 this morning, I woke up to see what time it was. I saw that John was texting with one of our friends on the East Coast about Clark County mail-in ballots. At that exact moment in time, he was also running through his list of people, Democratic strategists who complained about Fetterman trying to exact revenge on
God.
them.
It was like
Yeah.
my Arya Stark.
I like that. I like that a lot. Good for you.
I mean, it was. Yeah. Anyway, enough about that.
Yep.
Anyway, you want to talk about how Fetterman did it?
I mean, it seems like he outran Biden in some of the more rural counties and then did incredibly well in Philadelphia, right? I mean, this is sort of the path.
Yeah, what we've talked about since Hillary almost won in 2016 in Pennsylvania is no, you can't just focus on the places where we drive up the boat. In places like Philadelphia, that you have to drive down the margin. In rural counties, he was explicit about that, even in his victory speech, that he wanted to go to those places to
From
drive
day one. That
from
was the
day
strategy,
one, and he was the right person to do it.
He outran Biden by 8 to 10 points in a lot of those rural counties that Trump won.
It's the Obama 2012 coalition is what he reconstituted.
Yeah.
With an added sprinkling of former Romney suburban voters.
Yeah. And I will also say that, there's an online debate that probably doesn't translate into the real world between
Come on.
Yeah, right.
Make it happen.
Is it economic issues? Is it kitchen? There's the much maligned kitchen table issues, or is it abortion and democracy? John Fetterman did all of the above. He talked about abortion a lot. He talked about democracy, but he was relentless on talking about economic issues. He was focused on economic populism, and he was still progressive on issues like choice and marijuana legalization and stuff like that. So he has criticized before, John Fetterman, the sort of left moderate ideological divide. He says it's kind of phony, and it's really about voters wanting to know that you're someone who's going to fight like hell for them. And that's exactly who Jon Fetterman is, and that's, I think, why he won.
He also did a very, I think, good job of blunting some of the crime attacks that he was facing just by, I think he never really got defensive. He doesn't really do defensive in a way that's, I think, people should look at, because even when he was getting hit for being on the parole board, he never backed away from talking about the importance of reform. He talked importance of giving people a second chance. He didn't pivot and say, no, I'm the tough on crime guy. He kind of kept to what people liked about him, and I think that was good.
Yeah, it is I mean, he's obviously a very non-traditional candidate. He was running against a really non-traditional opponent, but it was the classic way in which you just win a campaign. You run everywhere. You leave no vote. You take no vote for granted. The measure that has almost always decided who's going to win or lose is the question in the poll about who's going to fight for you.
Always.
He hammered that home. He had an actual economic plan. Mm-hmm. He had a 4-point plan. He mentioned it all the time. Make shit at home. Take on corporate greed. It was good. It is the model of what Democrats should do, because we can talk about some of the troubling trends in some of this otherwise very good night, but if we want to have a consistent shot at a Senate, Democratic Senate, and make the Electoral College more friendly to us, we are going to have the Fetterman coalition in all of these states.
I also won with like the most enormous disadvantage you could ever imagine, which is your candidate having a stroke and not being able to campaign for months and months and months, and ran a relentlessly brutal but funny and lighthearted and devastatingly effective campaign to change the way people think about Dr. Oz. It was so impressive.
And made sure that he was framed as this out-of-touch plutocrat that's not going to fight for you. I mean, I also, too, we talked a lot in the last couple episodes about, like, the media narrative is mostly about the issues of democracy and abortion. But, like, when we were in Nevada with the candidates there, and we were with Katie Porter down in Orange County, like, Democrats in their speeches and their ads, like, they all had economic plans. They were all talking to volunteers about, you're going to hear inflation when you knock on the doors. Here's what you say about inflation. Here's what you do it. And don't forget to talk about protecting abortion access. And don't forget, It was just an all of the above strategy, and it worked.
Yeah, I actually just went to look because Susie Lee, who we were with in Nevada, and is currently, that was one that Ralston thought we might lose, just kind of up by nothing. We'll see if it holds. Hopefully it does. When we were doing a canvas kickoff with her, she ran through all these issues, democracy, ran through abortion. But then she said, you're going to get questions about inflation. And here's how I want you to talk about inflation. Talk about how serious it is. Talk about how we're the people that are going to address it. And I do think, we talked a lot in the run-up about how we felt like Democrats had a cleaner argument on abortion than they were able to make on inflation. But I do think Republicans, just hoping that they could say, look at these terrible Democratic cities. Look how bad things are. Crime, immigration, inflation, without having a clean message of their own of what they're going to do, really hurt them, because Dr. Oz had nowhere to go. None of these Republicans had anywhere to go. And if we're winning 40% of the people who said this was their most important issue, that is a real failure on the part of Republicans to make a clean message in a year where they really could have succeeded.
It was a massive strategic miscalculation from McConnell and McCarthy. Is they wanted to be the generic alternative. And by being the generic alternative who stood for nothing, they created a vacuum that Democrats filled with accurate pictures of their extremism. And they did.
Yeah, well, you know who else filled that vacuum is Donald Trump.
Yes,
and a lot of their candidates.
But,
and the Supreme Court.
But to contrast it on abortion access and Dobbs, Florida Republicans passed a 15-week abortion ban. So there was a law in place that they could point to and say, this is our alternative. And, look, Florida might have been just sort of a uniquely weird situation this cycle, but Democrats didn't seem to benefit from turnout around the Dobbs decision in Florida like they did everywhere else.
That is true. What do we know about the outstanding votes in Arizona, Nevada, and what's going on with Georgia?
Georgia's likely to be runoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's an easy answer.
In Nevada, we are we thought we were waiting for the county Reno was in, and Clark County, which is where Las Vegas was in. Then we got some of the Reno vote, and it wasn't leaning towards Catherine Cortez Masto as we hoped. So now, in 5 minutes, we're recording this in the morning on Wednesday. In 5 minutes, we're going to find out how many votes there are outstanding in Clark, which will tell us if Catherine Cortez Masto can catch up. But either way, even whatever we're going to hear, it's going to be incredibly close in Nevada.
The fundamental question in both Arizona and Nevada is there's a bunch of outstanding mail vote. Some portion of that mail vote is mail ballots that were dropped off on Election Day. There is some theory that those mail drop-off on Election Day voters are actually profile more like in-person Election Day voters who profile as more Republican. So the split between traditional mail balloting and in-person drop-off on Election Day, will determine how much outstanding Democratic vote there is in Arizona and Nevada. And if it is, we need a ton in Nevada we need to win the in-person drop-off at a very good rate to make up the delta. In Arizona, the number of in-person drop-offs and how those voters profile will determine whether Masters and Kerry Lake can catch up to Kelly and Hobbs.
Yeah, and right now, Kelly is outrunning Hobbs by a few, so he's in better shape than she is. So as you guys mentioned, Georgia's headed for a runoff. How does Raphael Warnock win a runoff? Is it easier or harder if the Dems have already won the Senate by then?
Here, I wrote a couple advantages and disadvantages.
Cool.
Advantages.
Pro-con list, eh?
Why not? Here's a couple. Kemp was on the ballot. He will not be on the ballot this time. Democrats are genuinely.
These are
advantages.
Advantages for
Warnock.
For Warnock.
Yeah, I'm doing it from the perspective of Democrats.
I don't know.
Democrats.
You're doing a little both sides.
No.
Both sides action.
So look, Democrats generally love Raphael Warnock because he's an incredible candidate, senator in person. Republicans were holding their noses. So that's and without having other Republicans, they have to churn out just for the purpose of electing this schmuck. Fine. If we manage to pull it out in Arizona and Nevada, the fact that Senate control is not at stake would make revving up enthusiasm more important. It would make it more about the candidates themselves. And then, as in 2020, once again, we'll have a massive amount of Republican infighting as the kind of the story unfolding. Trump and DeSantis, Trump
go to Georgia,
all of this arguing, and that
it.
was extremely helpful in helping us gain the majority when Warnock and John Ossoff won the day before the insurrection.
By the way, Kayleigh McEnany was on Fox News this morning saying Ron DeSantis should go to Georgia and campaign and that Donald Trump should not. So I'm sure that landed well at Mar-a-Lago.
Oh boy.
At the 19th hole.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to him.
Yeah, oh, God, he's just there. He is
doing
putting and
Raging.
looking at Ivana's grave and furious.
He calls it
that's why
apparently
it's there.
blaming Melania for Dr.
Yeah.
Oz.
Yeah, his future write-off.
And then disadvantage, if Senate control is at stake, then it becomes a massive clusterfuck with Republicans revving up the base. And
that's what I'm worried about. The hold your nose and vote for Herschel Walker, because even if you don't like him, Senate controls it.
Yeah, that's my disadvantage. That's my fear. That's my fear. And we'll
see.
Yeah, it's interesting. The other question is one of the takeaways we may have from this election is that Democrats are now a better midterm voting party because our coalition has changed, and we do very well in specials. We've done very well, always done very well in specials. We did particularly well in specials.
So maybe that goes to runoffs.
This will profile as a special election. So, I mean, you can sort of argue it either way, and the political environment can matter a lot.
The point, if we go to a runoff and the Senate control is at stake, we're all going to be freaking out and pushing everybody to do everything they can because no one's going to know.
And I think Democrats have a good argument there, which is Senate control is at stake, and this is about Joe Biden's ability to fill a whole bunch of judicial vacancies. And let's remember, the reason that we're in this mess because of Dobbs is because of judicial vacancies.
For sure.
And this is what's at stake in this election. I mean, I think it's a pretty clear.
Check the Republican court, make sure we have the ability to confirm is good. Although, stop Joe Biden from confirming any more radical judges is also going to work on the other side.
The presenting sponsor of Pod Save America is Simply Safe Home Security. It's nice when things are easy, especially when it comes to something as important as protecting your home and family. That's why we use Simply Safe. They make it easy to protect what's important to you with advanced security technology and 24/7 professional monitoring. Order now to get 50% off any new system. Simply Safe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, a third year in a row. In an emergency, professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get faster police dispatch, all for under $1 a day. SimpliSafe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. With the top-rated SimpliSafe app, you can arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings.
Love it. Is it true that a SimpliSafe system can repel even a red wave?
Yeah, no red wave will be able to get inside of your
Penetrate
home.
your house?
And I have a SimpliSafe. I set it up, and then boom, it works. And
It's just that easy.
It's just that easy. It's a great system. It's completely reliable. I'm so glad that I have a SimpliSafe. And we were out knocking on doors. A couple houses had SimpliSafe. I couldn't break in.
You tried.
Yeah, I tried.
Don't miss your chance for massive savings on our favorite security system. Get 50% off any new system at simplisafe.com/crooked. This is their biggest discount of the year. That's simplisafe.com/crooked. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Pod Save America is brought to you by Tommy John. It's fall, so why are you still sweating in your pants? Seasons change, and so should your undies. Yeah, I hope so. Grab a few new breathable pairs of Tommy John underwear. In Tommy John underwear, you're that much more comfortable, so you can do everything better. Name a problem with other underwear, and Tommy John's solved it.
Uncomfortable waistband.
Inflation.
Done. Done. No inflation. No inflation in Tommy
Great.
John's. Tommy John's breathable, lightweight fabric has 4 times the stretch of competing brands. They come with a no-wedgie guarantee, thanks to a non-rolling waistband and legs that never ride up. Plus, they feature a horizontal quick-draw fly.
Do you have trouble with inflation in your underwear?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Hammock pouch support stops the awkward swing and slap, giving everyone something to be grateful for. With over 18 million pairs sold, people love Tommy John underwear. That's why Tommy John doesn't have customers. They have fanatics. We love Tommy John underwear. We all wear it.
Yeah, like the Philly fanatic wears it, I bet. I'm guessing, since they have fanatics.
Yeah. Plus, everything's backed with Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear or its free guarantee. Go to TommyJohn.com/crooked right now for 20% off your first order. 20% off at TommyJohn.com/crooked. TommyJohn.com/crooked. See site for details. Pod Save America is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Nothing is too niche for Squarespace. And whatever your hobby is, you can start your business for it. John, and Tommy share strange, funny things that you think could be a fun niche item to sell, or share one of your niche obsessions and encourage listeners to lean into their uniqueness. So my niche obsession is Twitter.
Yeah.
Here's a niche obsession. I'd like a list of all the crazy demands that are going to be made of Kevin McCarthy by various members of the crazy caucus. Like, what do you think Paul Gosar wants? Like,
Yeah, deranged dentist.
What does Paul Gosar want?
Wants to know where the aliens are.
With Squarespace email campaigns, you'll stand out in any inbox, even Paul Gosar. Start with an email template and customize it by applying your brand ingredients like site colors and logo. Built-in analytics measure the impact of every send. Squarespace's insights can help grow your business. You can even build a marketing strategy based on your top keywords or most popular products and content, thanks to Squarespace Analytics. Plus, it's easy to display posts from your Twitter, Instagram, and other online accounts with connected social media, making your channels. Stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything, your products, content you create, even your time. Head to squarespace.com/crooked for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use promo code CROOKED to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Pod Save America is brought to you by Expensify. If there's one thing that most people can agree on, it's that the old-fashioned way of handling expense reports and keeping track of receipts is a pain. That's why you need to check out Expensify. Expensify keeps money moving. More than 10 million people around the globe use Expensify's pre-accounting platform to reimburse expenses, manage business credit cards, generate invoices, pay bills, and plan trips, all from one easy-to-use app. With Expensify, you can snap a photo of a receipt and submit it, create workflows for approvals, and sync up accounting and HR platforms. Whether you're working for yourself, managing a team, or closing the books for your clients, Expensify makes it easy so you have more time to focus on what really matters. It's easy to log in, get set up, and start using Expensify right away. Expensify makes it easy to keep track of receipts. We use Expensify here at Crooked.
Did you know that Lovett tried to expense his gambling losses, and Expensify was like, "No, sir,
Yeah.
can't do that."
Wait,
Yeah.
you can't expense that?
Kept us on the straight and narrow.
Yeah. I got all our
I was thinking about business the whole time.
I got all our room expenses from when we were in Vegas.
Expensify.
You too. And I forwarded them right to Neil.
Thank you.
Okay,
Just so you know.
I'm fine with
So
it.
you know.
Not so crazy.
Download the app or sign up at expensify.com today. Let's talk about the House. So, as Lovett mentioned, the theory going into the election was that candidate quality would matter less in House races, which would help Republicans pick up anywhere from 20 to 40 seats. That isn't going to happen. So what did happen with the House? Dan, what do you think? And where do you think this ends up?
It's it's hard to say. There are a lot of outstanding votes in California. We're probably not going to know the answer about a whole bunch of California House races for weeks, maybe. But it looks like it's going to be very, very close. I think some of the projections are somewhere between a 1-seat Republican majority to a 13-seat Republican majority, depending on how some of this stuff breaks. A lot of the places Republicans had to win were in purple and blue states, and purple and blue states voted just like in a presidential election, not in a midterm election. It's certainly not like the midterm election we expected. And so Democrats did better, and they won mostly in seats that Joe Biden had won, and with the one exception, which I know we'll get to. And so Republicans then blew a bunch of races they shouldn't have blown, like some of the ones we talked about in Ohio that were Trump's fault. And therefore, they blew a historic opportunity to take the House in a pretty spectacular fashion.
How much of a difference does it make if Republicans have a small House majority versus a bigger one?
So Kevin McCarthy, by temperament and flaws at the core of his being, was always going to be a weak speaker. He just gives off a weak and ability to be manipulated kind of energy. Him needing to keep his entire caucus together, where 3, 4, 2, whatever defections means he no longer has a majority to pass things, makes him extraordinarily meek. Makes him someone who needs everybody, has to respond to everybody. It also turns a lot of must-pass bills into a real clusterfuck for him, where if he's losing anybody and all of a sudden it's, do we shut down the government, or do I go walk across the street and ask walk across the aisle and ask Nancy Pelosi for help, is going to be a question that comes up more frequently. So and that will be in a climate in which everyone is fucking furious at him for not delivering a bigger majority. If he does manage to become the speaker, which he still probably will, but man,
seems up in the air. Yeah,
it's pretty fucked.
It seems like Marjorie Taylor Greene and that crew is going to try to extract concessions from him
definitely.
Even give in exchange for their support for him being speaker.
Well, and listen, Donald Trump engages, once every 2 years on congressional strategy, and he's been shouting about using the weapon of the debt ceiling against Democrats. So that's coming. That train's coming down the tracks.
If the Democrats cannot eliminate or at least forestall the debt ceiling confrontation, and I know, and that is not going to be that is going to be really on Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to get that done.
Yeah,
because you're going to have to do it in reconciliation.
Just do it.
Yeah. You mean you're talking about basically that they should do it during
in the lame duck.
In
the lame duck, we have one last chance to take this detonator out of the Republicans' hands, because
but it's up to them. It's up to Joe.
They
Manchin
have to
and
do
Kyrsten
it.
Sinema.
Yeah, but I mean, the other story of the House is clearly Ron DeSantis' strength in a Florida gerrymander was enormously helpful, and then for Democrats in New York, the map we wanted got tossed out. Thank you, Andrew Cuomo. And we lost a bunch of seats there. I wonder, though, how much in New York Lee Zeldin running a surprisingly strong race kind of pulled some of those Republican candidates over the finish line.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys about New York because, everyone's first reaction, and this is a correct reaction, is like, oh, we got screwed on the maps in New York, right? And if Andrew Cuomo's conservative judges didn't strike down the map, we might win the House, which I think is true. But the seats that we're losing, including Sean Patrick Maloney, the chair of the DCCC, just lost his, are still Biden plus 5 districts, all the way up to Biden plus 15. And then Kathy Hochul only is 5 or 6 points ahead of Lee Zeldin.
Chuck Schumer, who in his previous 2 elections, the Senate won 66%, 70%, is in the mid-50s after spending a lot of money. You look at the upstate map, the bottom fell out. A lot of upstate New York behaving like a lot of other kind of rural, whiter parts of the country, kind of reverting to the mean.
There were a lot of indicators on the bad vibes scorecard before the election. There was the economy, there was inflation, there was a lot of Trafalgar polls. We can get into that later. But then there was also the fact that the president of the United States was campaigning in Yonkers, which didn't make me feel great about sort of the broader trends or what numbers people were probably seeing that have more access to data than I do. But it does seem like there's a weird Florida and a weird New York story this year.
Yeah, I'll also say too, so it does look like we're losing a couple of these New York congressional. We'll see what happens when it's all done, but we're going to lose a couple by a point or two, win, I think, 1 by a point or 2, which means everything mattered. And New York had the chance to pass a couple ballot measures, one of which would have kept the redistricting in place, but also New York Democrats didn't get behind enough a measure that would have gotten rid of this antiquated requirement that you have to be registered 10 days in advance of election, and that would have gotten rid of another dumb rule which requires an excuse for absentee ballot. So like New York has been behind in how accessible voting is compared to California, Colorado, and a lot of even Republican states. They had an opportunity to fix it. Republicans spent a ton of money to stop those ballot measures. Democrats didn't do enough, and it really could be that the control of the House is at stake, and the fact that Sean Patrick Maloney, who kind of ran a bunch of shenanigans to put himself in place because he was the guy that could win this seat and then loses. It's just it's not a great day to be a leader of the New York Democratic Party.
No.
But what did the voters do? What I keep wondering, right? Like why? I do think it might come down to something as simple as there's cranky people all over the country, right? Wrong track and all these exit polls was like off the charts. In New York, when it's just all Democrats in charge from local all the way up to state, the only thing you can do to express your distaste is to vote against the Democrats.
True.
Yeah, of course that's true. I mean, like two things can be true. One can be that Democrats really fucked up strategically. Another is that Democrats another can be that they just had a bad night in a few key places. Although I will say that the district my district from growing up is sending an insurrectionist to Congress, right? Like there's it was a very bad day in New York.
So one of the biggest concerns about this midterm was the number of election deniers running for offices that would put them in charge of our elections, like governor, secretary of state. Just about all of them lost, though we are still waiting on final results in Arizona and Nevada, and Kari Lake could end up being governor still. But there was a lot of pearl clutching over Democrats employing various tactics to boost some of these MAGA candidates in the primaries. Any lessons from the results? Any reflections on the Democratic meddling, the much maligned Democratic meddling?
The ends justify the means.
They sure did.
Look, as somebody who lost a lot of money in a casino recently, you can't win if you don't play.
I mean, listen, I grew up under the tutelage of Mitch McConnell, and Canada equality matters, and we learned that in a lot of places.
Where did you grow up?
I was just making a joke. You guys all looked at me like, really? I didn't know you were.
Were you a page?
Yes.
Were you Josh Holmes?
No, I'm not a high-heeled lobbyist, as Tim Miller calls him. Yeah, he called him a lobbyist in lifts, I think.
So funny. No, look, I realize there's a lot of strategists and people who are very upset, Twitter strategists and people who are very upset by this. But this is one for Democratic strategists, people who work on these campaigns, the DSCC, the DCCC, they get a lot of shit. They did really well in this midterm.
Well, and also
in this strategy and others, let's give these people their due. They did really well.
I hate this conversation because it takes place in Twitter, this very black and white thing. Like Democrats either did it.
Yeah,
it was
I know.
Everything they did was exactly right or exactly wrong, and it's different in every single case. If we had not meddled in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano was probably still winning that race. He won by 24 points. The same things likely happened with the happened in a couple other places, and Trump endorsed these people too. So was it the Democratic ads or the endorsement of the very popular with the Republican base former president who looms large over everything? We don't really know. But the point is extreme candidates are less electable, and we want to run against extreme candidates. There is risk in that for sure. And when Kari Lake takes Arizona and succeeds from the union, we might reap some of the whirlwind there. But
which for some reason is so hard for people to understand, especially Twitter people, right? That extreme candidates are easier to beat than less extreme candidates. But would you have rather Maggie Hassan run against Chuck Morse in New Hampshire? I wouldn't have, because now we could be sitting here talking about how we're not going to get the Senate back.
We live in an uncertain world. It is a decision to try to maximize your victories while taking a certain amount of risk. That is looking to redound to our benefit right now. It could have gone the other way, but you make the best decision you can. Also, one other part of this that always bothers me, Democratic consultants are not going door to door putting a gun to Republican voters' head. Yeah, no. It is based on a theory. The theory being the Republican base has become so extreme and so radical that if you show them how awful these candidates are, they will get behind them and show the independent and Democratic voters in these states how unpalatable and extreme the Republican Party has gotten. stepping back and letting Republicans nominate someone who seems less extreme, even though that is not giving Republicans what they actually want, is also a way of kind of covering for what's become of the Republican Party. So why would we do that? Why would we help them in that way?
It's not our job to fix Republicans' problem. It's our job to beat them. And in this case, we did.
Yeah. And in the examples that worry me the most are like the Kerry Lake example. But as you point out, the type of meddling was different in every election. And I think in that one, it was like some Yahoo at the Arizona Democratic Party put out a press release saying that she like supported Barack Obama once. Like that's not a lot of meddling.
And then in Maryland, when Democrats helped get a far right candidate into the nomination for the governor's race, Larry Hogan, the very popular Republican governor, declared the race was over the next day.
And it was.
And we flipped the district. Yeah, we flipped Maryland, baby. Flipped Massachusetts.
Pod Save America is brought to you by Real Paper. Now it's time for a brief lesson on the history of toilet paper. The first perforated toilet paper rolls were introduced in 1890, but it wasn't until 1930 that we officially had splinter-free tissue. Tough time to be wiping your bum before 1930.
Yeah, not good to think about.
People just used what was on hand. Weird word to use. Corn cobs, parchment, even pages from the Farmer's Almanac. Nowadays, we're clear-cutting our forest just to make something that we use once and flush down the toilet. That's why we love Real Paper. That's why we all use Real Paper here. They make sustainable toilet paper that contains no trees and instead uses 100% bamboo. Real's paper is certified by the Forest Stewardship Council, meaning that they are responsible for harvesting the bamboo grass that's used for their paper. And while the other conventional tree-based papers are wrapped in plastic in the grocery aisle, Real Paper's packaging is plastic-free, compostable, and offers free shipping on all orders. We love it.
Huge fan.
For all the obvious reasons.
Real Paper is available in easy, hassle-free subscriptions or for one-time purchases on their website. All orders are conveniently delivered to your door with free shipping and 100% recyclable plastic-free packaging. If you head to realpaper.com/crooked and sign up for a subscription using our code CROOKED at checkout, you'll automatically get 30% off your first order and free shipping. That's REELPAPER.com/crooked or enter promo code CROOKED to get 30% off your first order plus free shipping. So let's stop flushing our forests and try Real's tree-free paper. Real is paper for the planet. Pod Save America is brought to you by Aspiration. When it comes to climate action, your money is power. With Aspiration, a new kind of change is in your pocket. Simply by moving your money to Aspiration, you're giving your deposits a cleaner, greener home. Aspiration is a climate-friendly alternative for your money. Get an account and debit card that's built to help your wallet and the planet. Aspiration lets you plant a tree by rounding up every swipe of your debit card. Aspiration's been hard at work helping people align their money with their values, funding the planting of over 100 million trees on their way to funding the planting of 1 billion by 2030. It's no wonder why Forbes, NerdWallet, and The Penny Hoarder recommend Aspiration for the eco-conscious. Best of all, there's no credit check, no overdraft fees, and with Aspiration, you just pay what you think is fair, even if that's zero, because money shouldn't stand in the way of you doing the right thing. Make your dollars make a difference. Open an Aspiration account at aspiration.com/tree. Help save the planet with your Aspiration debit card. Open your account at aspiration.com/tree today. Aspiration.com/tree. Terms and conditions apply. Aspiration is not a bank. Deposits are FDIC insured up to $2 million per depositors. Pod Save America is brought to you by Smile Actives. Are you self-conscious about your smile due to stains? Are your teeth aging you?
No, because
Good.
I use Smile Actives.
There you go. Popular food and drinks are known to stain teeth. Beverages like coffee and wine stain them over time. So what can you do to brighten your smile? Well, you should give Smile Actives a try. Smile Actives is safe, effective, easy to use, and will keep you smiling proudly. Yeah, I started using it, and now I love it. It's great, and you can whiten your teeth just by putting it in your toothpaste, and so you don't have to go to the dentist, which is expensive, and it can be painful. Instead, you just put Smile Actives in your toothpaste, and it's great. Their PolyClean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves and crannies to get better whitening. So no change in your routine, no extra time, yet people will start commenting on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. 97% of Smile Actives users in a clinical trial reported up to 6 shades whiter on average, all within 30 days. Visit smileactives.com/crooked today to receive our special buy one, get one free offer plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/crooked. So all this talk of election deniers brings us to MAGA King Donald Trump, who might have had the worst night of anyone. This is now the third election in a row he has lost for the Republican Party. There are reports that he's ripshit and that everyone in the party is ripshit at him, though, of course, they're not saying it out loud or on the record. You know, everyone's very afraid, as usual. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis just had the best night of arguably any Republican in the country. How does last night change the dynamics of 2024 for Trump and the GOP?
I mean, like, what Trump will always benefit from is he has an army of pundit janitors mopping up after him on primetime on Fox and Newsmax and OAN. So they'll find a way to spin this. But Ron DeSantis comes out of this thing looking like a political force to be reckoned with. And that makes me happy in the short term because it'll make Donald Trump very, very sad. But it's nerve-wracking in the long term. But I do think, like, people who are looking for an alternative to Trump are going to see DeSantis getting stronger and stronger. And, like, the people who ran strongest last night were Republicans, were DeSantis and then Brian Kemp in Georgia,
Sadly.
who kicked the shit out of a hand-picked Trump candidate in a primary and then won overwhelmingly because of perceived distance from Donald Trump that helped him to get independence. So, I mean,
unfair as that was, you know.
Yeah, look, I mean, I wish Stacey Abrams had won as well, but, like, you know, I think Trump attacking Kemp probably helped him. So, it was a very, very bad showing for MAGA world.
I mean, it should come as no surprise that Trump has terrible taste.
Yeah.
And I mean, his choices for candidates, if Democrats hold on here, it will be Donald Trump's fault. He gave the Republicans bad candidates. Made it easier for Democrats to win. He cost them a whole bunch of House seats. He cost them governorships. And that is on him, and that is only on him. And as we talked before this election, this was going to be this incredibly unpredictable election. And what hurt Republicans is, one, Trump picked bad candidates, forced them on them, but then also Donald Trump is very, very unpopular. And people who thought there were only a small slice of people who did not like Donald Trump who voted for Republican. Joe Biden also struggling in the polls, but a much larger swath of people who were not particularly pleased with Joe Biden were willing to vote for Democrats because Donald Trump had to make this election about him. He picked the candidates. He did the rallies. He teased his presidential endorsement the night before the election.
Also, he made all of his handpicked candidates embrace the big lie about the last election, and it turns out that's not very popular with voters.
And didn't he raise $100 million and spend $15 million? I mean, he kind of he didn't do all he could here. He didn't leave it all in the field.
Let's chill out. You keep this talk up. You might not.
Yeah, that's right. We're
We're
going to keep it in.
All right.
No, I mean, the only way it could have gone worse is if only he had followed his own instincts and announced on Monday night that he was running. That's the only way it could have gone worse.
You got to announce your next movie before your current movie comes out.
I think he made a mistake. I think he should have announced it first.
His instincts were right. He got talked out of it. He wanted to do it Monday night.
He knew what was going to happen.
He was right.
Well, now it seems much more likely that we get a Trump DeSantis primary, and we're going to now go through another round of do the conservative elites and the conservative media have the sway to actually help defeat Donald Trump, or are they just going to fall in line? The Murdochs this morning are already fluffing DeSantis. They're on the new.
They've been on that train for a while.
On the New York, cover the New York Post.
Yeah.
Ooh.
DeSantis, and some of the Fox pundits have been talking up DeSantis. Like you said, Kayleigh McEnany, former Trump White House press secretary. It's
Look. Who knows what's going to happen? We don't know if DeSantis is going to do it or not. Obviously, he's going to be getting. His phone is just people telling him to run today. But everyone seems to, even the people that maybe correctly say, hey, DeSantis is a much better national figure for the Republican Party than Donald Trump, they seem to skip this part where that requires beating Donald Trump in an election and then him doing what? Like being cool with that for a while? Like, the path for Ron DeSantis becoming the Republican nominee runs through Donald Trump either you lose to him or you make him lose. And Donald Trump losing to Ron DeSantis makes it an existential question for Trump that he had. Let me say it like this: and Donald Trump losing to Ron DeSantis makes it existential for Trump that DeSantis go on to lose. His ego requires it. So it's like I don't see how this DeSantis train doesn't run into this
Trump train.
Trump train.
Wow, yeah.
Thank you for helping.
It's a train crash.
I was thinking it's a train. I was trying to figure out, like, could Trump be? I forgot the word herd. a herd of cows on the tracks.
That wouldn't have been better.
I don't think it would have been. That's why I hesitated.
All right, how about Joe Biden? So
How about Joe Biden?
his approval rating in all the exits, again, was the worst of any post-war president at this point in his term, including Trump. And yet he is on track to have the best midterm results of any post-war president. How do we explain that? What does it mean for Joe Biden's future? A senior White House official told Playbook this morning he's running. Who wants to take that first?
Look, I mean, I think politics is pretty binary, right? And the national narrative will be like a win is a win is a win. And if I were them, I would run out in front of as many cameras as I could and take credit for this. And I think that's what's going to happen today. Whether these results show like strength under the hood, I think is a far more nuanced debate that is answered in some of the exit polls.
If we had woken up today and we were looking at the bloodbath scenario we were, worried that could be the case on Monday night, everyone would be talking about Biden has to say he's not running, Biden's done, Biden's done, Biden's done. And none of those people today are going to say that the opposite is true. But Joe Biden is. He's well aware of what people would have said if he would have lost. So how could he not view this as a validation of his case?
I think if you want to try to unpack like what role Joe Biden played in this, if you want to, here are the positive things you can say is passing the Inflation Reduction Act gave Democrats something to run on. That was no question a jolt of enthusiasm for Democrats. Remember how depressed the party was in late July and August after a raft of failures. He also
didn't Joe Manchin pass that?
Someone named Joe was involved. I don't really know. Was Joe Scarborough? Yeah. And then he also had, unlike Trump, had the self-discipline to not make it about himself. It's very obvious the data showed that in the core battleground states, President Biden and Vice President Harris were not going to be a net benefit with the voters who were still making their decision.
Yeah, that's why Joe Biden was in Yonkers and Kamala Harris was at UCLA.
Yeah. But
she's
like that,
campaigning door to door.
That's not
an
easy decision for politicians to make, right? They did that. What it says about 2024 and his ability to win, we don't really know that. I don't think you will ever know that. This is an election that happened where really it was not about Joe Biden, and that was good for Democrats. And then what comes next will come next, but how the next several months played out. And if he abides by, besides the one random White House aide trying to send a message to the FEC this morning via Playbook, Joe Biden's timetable, as we've understood it to date, is that he would operate on the same timetable that Barack Obama used for his reelection, which was an announcement. I think ours was like on April 1st or early April of 2011. So there's a several month period here. Some of the reporting suggests that he's going to talk to his family and he's going to talk to Jill and, confirm a decision but is leading towards running. The next many months play out will sort of shape that political environment, and will include likely some pretty harsh confrontations with a new Republican Congress.
Yeah, the really negative indicator was the exit poll that said 66% of respondents do not want Joe Biden to run for president again. Now, that number can change over time when the economy gets better, inflation goes down, et cetera. But, that would no one likes that number in the White House.
And you said if the economy gets better. I mean, I think this is look, I am a big fan of how Joe Biden has governed as president. I will forever be grateful for him for the fact that he beat Donald Trump and got rid of Donald Trump. He has governed really well. I'm a huge fan of his agenda. He has basically done everything that the Democratic Party's base has asked him to do that is within his power to do, right? And I do not think it is his fault that we are dealing with inflation right now, particularly because inflation is up all over the world. But if inflation persists, if the economy tips into recession, if there is some combination of both, then fairly or not, he is going to be held responsible by voters for those economic conditions. And we already saw in this election how many people are holding him responsible for that. And we already saw that all these Democratic candidates who outran Joe Biden in their states, they didn't just not have Joe Biden campaign with them. They were actively running ads touting their independence from Joe Biden, criticizing Joe Biden on a whole bunch of issues, saying that they don't vote with Joe Biden all the time, that they disagree with him on certain issues. And so I do wonder about, you're right, the White House is going to tout this as a big Biden win, but I think it was, and I think he did everything that you said, Dan, to help make that win possible. But I think this was really Democratic candidates in these states sort of running their own race here.
And part of doing what it took to win was not being in some of the key states and key places. Yeah, I also think this is probably this is going to be the hardest time to have a conversation about this. Joe Biden is having the best performance in a midterm of any president besides George W. Bush after 9/11. But again, we will face the same question. A lot of people look at Joe Biden and say, he's too old. That's what we're talking about. That's the issue. And a lot of people are going to look at, it's not just going to be about, do they want Joe Biden to run again? We're going to have the same conversation we had in 2020, which is like, who is the alternative? Who is going to step up? Is that a valid alternative? And like, are those people going to start making that noise in the next few months as like the memory of this midterm fades and we start to kind of understand the broader environment that we'll be heading into? I just think we don't know.
When we dig into the results here, this is like a lot of votes still be counted, but this is undoubtedly a very, very good night for Democrats. We averted an absolute catastrophe, which a lot of historical political indicators said should have happened. We could have woken up today losing 40 House seats, losing the Senate, losing with big lie believers in charge of the electoral apparatus in almost all of the battleground states. That did not happen. Donald Trump could have a burst of momentum behind him. That did not happen. There are underneath it some like tough questions or troubling trends that we are going to have to wrestle with. Mm-hmm. The electoral map got much more narrow. Florida is gone. Ohio is gone.
We haven't talked about Texas, but not a lot of good news out of Texas last night.
And the more narrow that map gets, the fewer paths a Democrat has to 270. It also speaks to a narrowing of our coalition and that we continue to struggle with, in rural areas, with white voters, non-college, potentially, we don't know yet, but
some erosion
with Black and Latino voters. Even though they overwhelmingly supported Democrats, that's in the exit polls. We have to see in precinct level data if that's real. And what we don't, and then another one of those is, it is very hard to run for re-election if the vast majority of the country doesn't want you to run. Now, as Tommy said, that can change. We can't allow the good news to avoid, which we should celebrate and enjoy and take all of our energy and not worry about this until after the Georgia runoff. But think about those questions because we have a lot of work to do before 2024, whether Joe Biden runs or not, to address those things. And the economy is a huge part of that.
A huge part of it. I think even more than the age issue. Right? Like if we are in a recession, there's inflation. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the most talented politician in the world.
Yeah.
It's just really tough. And look, I think the upside of this is, the good news here is, we now know that the next Democratic candidate has to win Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, right?
That's it.
And
that's the path.
And we have now seen, we've been worried about like a Democratic bench. Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, hopefully Mark Kelly, Jon Fetterman, right? Raphael Warnock, hopefully, right? Like we have just seen a whole bunch of Democratic candidates, younger Democratic candidates who are like mainstream Democrats who united the progressive and moderate wings of the party win in really tough states. Like that's good news.
Yeah, I'm going to get some people to model success. So every candidate should go and talk to the people on Jon Fetterman's team to talk to them about how they thought through and executed a messaging strategy. Everyone running a campaign should go talk to organizers in Michigan to see how they figured out how to flip the state house and the Senate, keep the governor's race, take control of the state government, keep the Supreme Court, the AG, pass an abortion ballot measure, a voting rights ballot measure, and then go hang out for a couple weeks with the Wisconsin Democratic Party organizers who did an unbelievable amount of work over the course of years, building, organizing, like putting together an organization in an incredibly difficult state, and are probably the reason that we kept that governor's seat.
Ben Whitler is a hero.
Truly. I mean, this whole team.
Cannot even say how dangerous a situation we would be in right now if Tim Michels was the Republican governor of Wisconsin with a Republican legislature when it came time to certify in the 2024 votes in Wisconsin.
Oh, and by the way, who said that the Democrat would never win in the state again.
Yeah.
And by the way, we should say that the Wisconsin Republicans did not win a supermajority in that legislature too, which was going to render Tony Evers
Unfortunately, probably looks like we're losing that Senate seat if it's not been called yet.
Yeah, I do also.
Oh, right. Yeah, it has been.
I also think too, like, look, we're recording this on Wednesday. We could have had this great night and still lose the Senate, still lose the House. That is very much in play. But what I was feeling just last night and watching this all come in is, I think all of us who pay attention really closely, it's this feeling of like, do people care about these things? Like, do they care about democracy? Like, do they care? Will they actually show up? Like, does it matter that there are these people out there that don't believe in democracy, that believe the 2020 was stolen? Like, is this breaking through? Like, are these crime attacks going to work? Are people really like, are people going to be kind of buffeted by all this misinformation and propaganda? And this is another election in a row where right-wing fear-mongering just didn't deliver for them. It really didn't. And it's another election where, despite our worst fears, there really is a majority out there that is paying attention enough to reject some of the most extreme and radical people. And that continues to be true. And I think that is a broader reason just to be hopeful as we head into this slog of the next 2 years.
Hey, Tina Kotek wins in the Oregon governor's race. Pod Save America bounce.
Boom.
Nice.
More importantly, any thoughts on the polls? Is this the end for Trafalgar? Who won the Nadoff? Is Simon Rosenberg our god now?
I think so.
Yes, on Simon Rosenberg.
I mean,
yes.
Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like good pollsters did well, shitty pollsters did badly. Like Ann Seltzer nailed the Iowa results.
Yep.
I think she got it identical. The final New York Times polls were good, but like it was hard knowing how well Trafalgar did last cycle to tune those polls out. But they had Bolduc beating Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire. They had Zeldin beating Hochul in New York. And they had Michael Bennett winning by only 1 point in Colorado. And he just mopped up. And like those are huge misses. And what those misses did is they also impacted like the 538s and the aggregators, who have the very difficult job of trying to figure out how to incorporate or not incorporate those polling outfits. So like that's a hard job. I don't know how I would do it better, but I do think it's an industry that is really struggling to keep, pace with methodology to account for no one answering the phone, and then just these partisan outlets like flooding the place.
Whether it's because the polls worked or we just got lucky, because Trafalgar has its ratings for the same reason that a broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah. They just have a pro-Trump bias, and in states where Trump overperforms, they're right, and when he underperforms, they don't. But the polls were right. They're just like they are not precise instruments. They have something called a margin of error.
Right.
These races fell within the margin of error,
as advertised.
The Democratic panic that happened over the last couple of which I very much felt over the week before the election did not show up in the polls. It showed narrowing in the polls, but didn't show Republicans winning. And then Democrats ended up winning the close races within the margin of error of the polls.
And I do think one part of the freak out was the fear that the polls would show the same bias that they had in the previous races, and that didn't happen.
Yeah. Which that was a real fear.
There's still some question, I think, in Ohio, where there's some good polls, like the Data for Progress poll kind of nailed the Tim Ryan, J.D. Vance race. Others had it much closer than it seemed. I think there's still a challenge in some of those states that have a high percentage of rural voters and non-college white voters, sort of the Trumpier states. But in general, polls are supposed to give us a general idea of how things are going to go. They're not supposed to tell us exactly what's going to happen so we can modulate our emotions in advance.
And they did.
Disagree. Yeah. I like to live on the roller coaster.
Yeah, and I will say that, New York Times Siena, which is an A+ pollster, like their Senate race polls and those House polls were very accurate, very close. Which was pretty good for them. And I know they've worked hard at figuring out the non-response issue, including paying some people to take posts.
But Trafalgar, real clear politics. Bye-bye. No, we don't. Yeah, you embarrassed yourself.
And good for Simon Rosenberg.
Yeah.
And Tom Bonnier too.
Do you want to tell anybody who you guys want to explain this concept? I think
these are people who are very frustrated.
We talked about them. We did a whole segment on this.
It's a new episode.
Simon Rosenberg, Democratic strategist, who, as we said last pod, was saying that the Republican-leaning polls flooding the zone were screwing up the averages.
Designed for a narrative
And
change.
Tom Bonnier at Target Smart, who's been on this pod before as well, he was modeling the early vote and saying that the early vote was not definitely showing a Democratic win, but at least not showing a red.
Yeah, that part was definitely correct.
So, all right, guys. Well, that's all we have. We'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll have a whole bunch more results to talk about. But for now, good night.
Well done.
Bye, everyone.
Well done, everyone.
Yeah.